Inescapably.
Escapably foreign. Welcome to Without Borders. This is a podcast for expats, nomads, immigrants, or just anyone else that feels inescapably foreign. I'm here again with Keaton Jackson. If you missed the last two episodes, I recommend you just go back and listen to what Keaton and I were talking about. Just quick summary, we were talking about some of the differences between France and Canada, and also some of his experience living in Australia. Keaton has traveled to many different places, and he's currently getting his piloting license. And today we decided to bring on Dexter Docherty. Dexter is an Oxford graduate who moved into social policy and strategic foresight. We'll get a little bit more into his work throughout the podcast. And remember, if you are an English learner, make sure to check out withoutborders.fyi. You can access the transcripts there. Also, we have a bunch of different articles there, with one of which Dexter actually helped me out with. That's the one, Social Media Alternatives. So check that out on withoutborders.fyi. All right, guys, cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for having us.
No problem. We got beers here because we're just not used to seeing each other without beers. Keeps it natural. All right. So, Dexter, you're a little bit late to the podcast because you were in a nudist sauna.
Yes, I was in a nudist sauna today. It was a cultural experience.
So, with women and men, right? It's all gender. And
I think
how was it?
It was comfortable and relaxing, except for there was one point I started kissing the person I was with, and then somebody started touching themselves. I wasn't sure if that was normal, and I was the only one who could see it at the time, and so I was new. It was totally new experience to me. And I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do at that point. So I kind of just played it cool because I didn't want to look like I had to act like you've been there before in my head because I didn't want to look out of place. And then eventually she noticed and was like, "That's fucking weird. We're leaving." And then other than that, it was a wonderful experience. I talked to a bunch of really chill old people who live cool lives and know how to relax and zone out. So I feel wonderful and super relaxed.
Wait, I gotta ask. The guy was like, it was a guy who was touching himself or a woman?
Yeah. Yeah, dude.
And it was like full on, like he was just masturbating?
He was subtle, but you could kind of tell what was up.
Oh, God.
Just a subtle tug.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hey, it's been a day.
Would you go again?
Yeah, I mean, it's a relaxing experience. I think once you get to know the community, you can kind of know who the cool ones are. I mean, like, the reality is, like, it's like being at, like, raves and things like that. There's always going to be creepy people, and if you don't know how to behave in the space, you're more liable to be, like, bothered by those people kind of thing. So, if, I knew...
Well, you're saying this is a cultural experience, so is this a French cultural experience, or is this more a subculture thing?
I'm not sure. I'm not privy to comment on that. By cultural experience, I meant I was surprised.
Keaton, have you ever heard of these when you were living in France?
No, I do remember when I was living in France, I was actually looking for like a spa, and the only one in my neighborhood was I don't want to misquote it, but it was like I think it was like a pleasure house essentially. It was like I read the comments, and it was right beside Rue du Commerce. Dexter, it was do you know Rue du Commerce? It's in the 8th. No, it's in the 15th. Sorry. And yeah, I didn't end up going there because the comments were like, no, don't go here if you want. If it's not an actual legitimate spa treatment.
Yeah. Mine was an actual legitimate spa. There just happened to be a bad experience.
with the side of people touching themselves.
No, a single person. One person did that, and look, there's weird people everywhere. I don't think there's a higher preponderance of weird people doing weird stuff in any specific place.
Yeah. Well, what do you guys think about the freedom of nudity in France versus in Canada? Like, well, you guys know me. My family's from Belgium, so when I first came to Canada, my parents were just shocked about how just not down with nudity people were, right? Like my parents would change me on the beach because I was a little kid and they thought that was normal, but apparently it wasn't that normal, especially in like a conservative small town like Vernon. Maybe it was a little bit different in Vancouver. But then when I'd go to Europe, you'd see a lot of people nude on the beaches and it was just normal. And then you kind of have this idea that French are also more sexually liberated. But I don't think that's the case. What do you guys think? Do you think that...
I'll defer that one.
Go ahead, Dexter.
Really?
Me first? Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I completely agree. I guess even for Vancouver, like, yeah, if you were not, or not me, I don't include myself in that because I really don't give a shit about public nudity. I think everyone should definitely have should be, if they want to, they shouldn't be ashamed or scared to be nude.
For a second, I thought you were going to say everyone should just be nude.
Well, if you want to walk around nude, why should that be a problem, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, in Vancouver, we only have the one. It's like illegal. It is illegal if you are nude on a beach other than Wreck Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. My initial impression is.
And what about sexually? Do you think people are more sexually free in France than in Canada?
Well, I never had the opportunity to be a single man in France, so I don't know. From my one experience trying to court a French lady, it was freaking mission impossible. I'll say that. I did succeed, though, I guess.
We were both at your wedding. It's a mission impossible. You're a happily married man.
The hardest game I've ever had to play, I can tell you that, about the only French lady I've had to chase.
Well, that's one quote I wrote down from Dexter too. Is like, I speak French, but not pick up stranger at a bar on charm alone kind of French. I was thinking like, screw C1, screw all those certifications to see if you can pick someone up at a bar. Then you're good.
Then you're fluent. Once you can do that, Dexter, then you can, then you're really fluent, as you said.
Yeah, I think
Dexter, I'm curious what you think about this. How has it been for you, the flirtation life in France versus Canada, or just the sex life?
I don't think there's that substantially different. I think I've become more comfortable with myself through the time that I've spent in Europe. And I think that there's actually just a whole bias towards people who move to new places, right? I think if you're someone who's high openness to experience, moving around to new places, meeting lots of new people, you get into interesting adventures and things like that. I think if you're not pushed to move around too much, it can be hard to open up to a lot of things. I think a lot of that sort of, hey, life has to be lived a certain way, does come from a lack of movement. There's probably an opposite extreme of that, of some people who don't move around a ton, who just need some spice and some wildness thrown into their life and jump into those things. And then I think the other part is, when you get just the larger the city that you get to, the more weird, wild pockets can happen, just because it's a benefit of scale of the city and things like that. So I don't know. And then when it comes to things like nudity and stuff like that, I think we forget a lot of Canada is pretty cold, right? There's a certain amount of I don't know how much you want to whip it out in -20. And having done that once or twice, usually for a dumb drunk adventure, it's not something you do for very long before you start seeing potential risks to the SS Johnson or whatnot.
The SS Johnson.
Is that what you call it? That's
And we got different names for different eras and from different people and whatnot. I think as a general expression for the no, I don't. For my penis, it's the SS Johnson. That's weird.
Okay. But Dexter, you're also a little bit more in the expat scene, right? Do you think that's one of the reasons that you feel like there aren't as many differences because you're surrounded by expats no matter where you go? Or are you kind of getting more into the Parisian community now?
My life has been pretty mostly expats. I think the nature of working in international organizations is that you're a big mixture of people who are diverse in terms of the countries they come to, often not all that diverse in terms of the types of degrees and the places they did their degrees. It's a lot of people who, reasonably healthy family backgrounds with, enough money to be affording and supporting education. That varies a little bit country to country, but not a ton. Similar outlooks on how to support various causes they care about and those kinds of things. But by and large, I think if you're in sort of international circles of expats traveling around, there tends to be a certain type. It's a little bit more extroverted. They're pretty high openness to experience. People who make friends fast and have to, but also have to get pretty good at saying goodbye to people because you are all moving around. I think it's been a nice experience the last year or so as COVID started to settle, as I've started to feel like I wanted to commit to Paris or be in one place for longer than a year at a time, which I hadn't done in a while. That you start to make a different effort and deepen those friendships and relationships, and I want to see how that expands over the next year or two. But yeah, I don't know, and I maintain je parle assez bien français pour anglophone de Vancouver, so I can make friends here. I have some French friends. I think very often the in is that I'll have a French friend who will speak better English than I do French. So if we're one-on-one or with my friends, we'll be speaking English. But if I'm with them and their friends and their partners, then I'll be able to switch and be comfortable in that space. I do notice that I'm a little more tired out of that, right? I'm having to think a little bit more. It takes a little bit more effort to be funny and whatnot, but
it is
a little bit there. Go ahead, Keaton.
It is mentally not so much for me anymore, but I remember like that first year that I was living in France, and because I wasn't part of the expat community, so my everyday, like, I didn't speak English, or I spoke English with my wife, but like as soon as I stepped out of the house, it was just French, which was good. Like I totally appreciate it. Now my French level, I'm 100% fluent. Yeah, of course I make grammatical mistakes and everything, but that first year was super mentally exhausting to just like you said, it takes so much more effort to be yourself. Like in that first year, I wasn't Keaton. Like my personality didn't come across in French during that first year. And then in that second year that I lived in Paris, like that's when I really started to, like, if we were out with a group of friends at dinner or whatever, I started to be able to crack jokes and I could kind of like take control and steer the conversation like how I would do kind of in English, and like be able to have that kind of input is it's actually was really quite satisfying. Like I definitely noticed it happen, kind of like it was almost like not on the yearly mark, but like that second year is like, whoa, like I noticed a huge difference in my capability in communicating in French. It was nice.
And do you guys feel that you have a different side of yourself when you speak French? Because I know, talking to a lot of polyglots and people who speak multiple languages, they say you kind of have to develop a different part of your personality, right? Because obviously culture influences how your personality is, and language influences culture. So you kind of find new parts of yourself.
Yeah.
And for me in Spanish, like I'm doing that a bit, but mostly I just feel dumber, right? Because I can't explain myself quite as well. And then personality-wise, like I'm starting to get the humor and everything, and I do feel, I don't know, maybe a little bit less analytic, a little bit more, like when I'm in a group, it's more about feeding off of each other. And I feel like in English, it was just a little bit different. Like I felt more independent, and I feel a little bit more like an interdependent person in Spanish.
Well,
but what's it been like for you guys?
Well, for sure you have, I guess, like with each language. I would ask you, because Spanish is your third language, Nolan, but what about in Flemish? Like, do you have?
Because Flemish, because I associate it with family, I just feel a little bit childish. Like my Flemish is fluent, right? I can make jokes, I can speak about anything. But I feel a little bit awkward talking about taboo subjects or sex and everything like that, just because I'm not used to it. Well, I mean, my parents have always been free, right? I've been able to talk about sex, but you don't really make the quite as crude jokes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like for me, I don't know if I say I have, because as I was saying, like I kind of became more myself in that second year, and now I'm more myself when I speak French. But to kind of touch on the personality thing, Marie and I, we communicate in English, even though we could totally communicate in French fine. But it's so weird when we do speak in French because it's like we got to know each other in English, and so when we do speak in French, it's almost like two different people are talking. It's like that's not our relationship isn't speaking French to each other. It's like it's weird. It's weird how it is. It's like it's not Keaton and Marie. It's like two different people.
Well, that's interesting. So how is Marie, your wife, different when she's French and when she's speaking English?
I think, well, actually kind of sometimes now I actually get a little bit not annoyed. That's not the right word, but like sometimes I learn stuff because we have a pretty big group of French people here in Vancouver. So when we go and hang out with them and see our French friends, of course we speak in French. But sometimes I learn stuff for the first time about like how Marie's work week went when we're with her French friends. Even though I do ask her how her work week was and she responds in English, but she doesn't tell me all the details, whether that's like a language barrier or whatever. So like if sometimes it's just like, yeah, I discover new things whenever we're with French people because of course, she's more comfortable in talking in French. So she...
Well, I don't know about for French, but I've noticed that in Spain, it's much more culturally common to complain. Right. So in Spanish, I hear people complain a lot. And I notice like I start to complain a bit more in Spanish than I do in English. And that's a big difference in my personality.
Don't even get me started. I think that must be a European thing, man, because the French, all they do is complain. It's like small talk for them is complaining, it's a cultural thing, I think. But they definitely complain a lot. Like just like at the dinner table, you would just complain about your day or whatever. You know?
Yeah. No, I think it's similar here in Spain. The difference is that French people complain and then do something about it in protest, and Spanish people complain and then just don't protest.
Some big generalizations. I mean, I think the reality is I've spent so much of my time around people who are very critical thinkers and academics and things like that. And currency in that circle, regardless of where you are in the world, is kind of to be upset and critical and mad about stuff and complain about things. So I don't know. I can't personally speak to any of that because it's just been consistently across the board. That's kind of what people are supposed to do in academia. Be like, oh, it's like this sucks. It should be better. Why aren't we doing this? Let's theorize about it.
Yeah,
that's a good point, Dexter. Like, you want to go with?
Yeah, Dexter, I do want you to expand on that because you sent me an interesting message kind of related to this as well. You said, our ideas about cultural differences exist so people can complain about where they are or fulfill their superiority complex, right?
Yeah,
what did you mean by that? Is this kind of connected?
Yeah, what I wanted to get at with that is I think, especially when we talk about national level or like Europe to North America kind of differences, I think they're mostly overblown. I think it's a bad unit of analysis. I think there's really good regional cultures and things like that, so hyper local. I mean, even neighborhood level kinds of things. But I mean, in terms of where people are, I think there's greater similarity between people in Vancouver and a mid-sized French city, or certainly New York to Paris. Greater similarities than either of those places. And like you drive 3 hours outside of those cities and somewhere super rural. Like how similar is Vancouver to St. John's, right? And they're big cultural differences at those kinds of levels. There might be a little bit within those things, but I don't know. I think there's a lot in terms of trying to group how we group countries and as if there's a unified culture across those things that I'm not really that big of a believer in. I think that there's some hyper-local identities that to me jump out as the most interesting, the most useful to talk about. And then there's just some weird agglomerations of groups and things like that I'm not a huge believer in. And I think they do exist just so you can either sit around and say, oh, everything sucks here. Why isn't it better? Like for North Americans, it's like in Europe or, how many, if you're an ambitious person, friends, like, oh, in America, I'd be able to go get jobs and make $1 billion and create a cool startup or whatever. Or the reverse exists, where it's a means of fulfilling your arrogance and things like that. Of like, oh yeah, think about how lucky we are. Like everything else over there sucks. I think those things.
But don't you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off in terms of that. But I mean, don't you think those generalizations are created because there is some type of truth to them?
Maybe. I mean, it depends on which ones. I think I'd say,
Yeah,
to say
of
that
course.
there's some truth is different to say that they're vastly exaggerated. I mean, this is where I mostly come at. Is I think I see this a lot. I see it a lot now with Europeans and the way they would talk about the United States. And there'll be all this complaining. There'll be a lot of sort of frustration and condescension because you'll see something on the news that comes out of like deep South Alabama. And where those things come in, as if that's representative of the entire hyper-diverse country. The United States is the same size as Europe, has nearly the same population. There's a huge amount of diversity within that. And there's a whole lot of idea of like what Europeans are that is mostly actually a conversation about urban Western Europeans. Sometimes it's northern, sometimes it's a little bit of southern. But when you talk about Europe, and are you including Hungary in that conversation? Because some of the views and the values there, we don't use Hungary's views as representative of when we have a conversation about how Europe thinks about the world. But very often the perception of something like the United States is not necessarily the views of the people that I've interacted the most with from a lot of those places. And that's the
Definitely.
for the experience of a lot of people moving around, a lot of the circles I'm in, the differences do kind of disappear, or not entirely disappear. I just think that they're exaggerated. I think most of my point on this is that a lot of those sort of national level cultural things aren't really as significant. Or if you were to map out how large the differences are, maybe the similarities between like a little more rough and tumble neighborhood in Paris and New York are closer than either of those to the richest suburb or neighborhood in those cities, let alone Paris to like small towns in the south of France or whatever the equivalent is within Canada or the United States.
Definitely. But I think it's important to distinguish when we're talking, like what you're talking about. I think these generalizations come from kind of a flawed rhetoric that could be pushed by certain political ideologies or just certain people that are pushing these ways to differentiate between people. But of course, there is a lot of research in cultural psychology that actually show some of the differences that people think, right? And this is important to understand because, of course, when you go traveling, you want to be sensitive to the ways that people think, especially with like therapy or something like that, right? And I mean, I've mentioned this in a previous episode, but when some workers came to Sri Lanka, they used a lot of therapeutic methods from North America. And that just didn't work in Sri Lanka, right? Because they just have a different belief system there. And then in those cases, it's important to understand the differences. But I completely agree with what you're saying with these generalizations.
Yeah, and I want to jump in here. The statements I make about cultural differences being exaggerated apply to the differences between basically like Western countries. I would count Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and Canada, the United States. I don't know the Mexican context of
the weird countries, right? Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic.
I've never heard that. What acronym?
Yeah, it's an acronym. It's about like how, I don't know, like 70% of the research gets done in weird countries. And then 90% of that research is from university students. So a lot of the things that we think about people or that you see in the headlines is actually just from middle class to upper middle class Westerners, right? And that obviously does not reflect the world's psychology. Yeah. Okay. Well, Dexter, talking about generalizations, here's another good quote. I just have so many Dexter quotes. If you are living in Paris and it gets to you emotionally that a waiter or person at the post office is a dick, you should leave. So obviously there's a generalization about the French that they're a little bit sour. In Spanish they say too, like que agrio. Do you think this is a little bit true when it comes to the post office then and servers, or what's been your experience with this?
I'm making a comment about living in Paris specific there. I'm not going to generalize France. I don't know the rest of France. But in terms of these things, yeah, look, so the way I thought about this is that to make this not a little less just talking shit and make it slightly intellectual, I think that anywhere you live is going to involve some kind of work. And you've got to put in you've got to decide what kind of work you like and what kind of energy and trade-offs you have with that. I use the example. I have a friend of mine who lives on a houseboat in a fairly small town. And, I visit once in a while for like a couple days. I couldn't do it for more than 2 or 3, but it's beautiful. It's super relaxing. There's all these wonderful things that come with it. But just the day-to-day existence is a certain kind of work. You got to clean the boat. You got to take care of all those kinds of things. And the work inherent to living in a big, busy, hustle and bustle city is that people are busy and don't have time for you and don't have time for your shit. And occasionally they're going to be rude, right? I mean, this is where, like my understanding of like New Yorkers being tough is the same kind of thing. Don't waste people's time. And that just means that you can't expect the same kind of patience and politeness. People are moving around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it. The work inherent to living in a big, intense city like Paris is going to be that somebody's going to be mean to you once in a while. Have thick enough skin to deal with it. If you don't like it, go somewhere else where you like the work that's inherent to that. I don't know. I mean, Keaton probably speak to that. He's in a long-term happy relationship. Any kind of relationship you have is going to involve work. And that's going to be the case with your relationship to where you live, the place you live, the city, the house, whatever it may be. And you got to just get yourself in a position where you like the trade-offs inherent in the work involved with that. So personally for me, I get excited about that. I think it's a fun cultural experience when a waiter just gives me absolutely the dirtiest look and just treats me like I'm useless. Like, yeah, that's what I'm here for. It's a humbling experience. It makes me a better person.
I think the important, or one of your keywords that you use there is trade-off. It's at what point, when you're putting in all this work, do you need to see the trade-off? Like, do you need to reap your rewards? Because at what point do you make that call? Like, oh yeah, I've been here for 2 years. I'm putting in so much effort, so much work, and I'm not seeing it pay off. I mean, at least that was my experience in France. And I love France. Marie and I will most likely end up back in France one day. But like after 2 years, you're just grinding, and at least I just felt just stuck. Like I felt like I was not going to be able to advance my life or live my life in the way I wanted to live. So I just thought, like, what's your trade-off? Like, how are you finding you've been there for almost 3 years now, over 3 years, right?
Not quite, actually. It's 2.5, and then I spent 5 of them teleworking from Spain. So it's a little bit, we'll see. One of them, the first year was very COVID-y, so it didn't feel like it felt it was a very different experience. I could have been wandering around anywhere, but I was ready for the change of pace. I liked the alone time on that. I have found the experience good because there's a big city energy that I appreciate. I'm in a work situation I like. All the positives are ticking out. I've made some good friends. I was lucky with those kinds of things. So, any of these things, the gamble and the upsides paid off great. On the other side of it, I think I came in at a time where the humbling parts of this were really good. This is an intense and humbling city. It is big enough, and because I don't have pick someone up in the bar on charm alone kind of French. I'm not as important here as I was in other settings in my life, right? You could be a big name on campus in a small university town. You can, in Montreal, you can build yourself up in those environments to the point where, you walk people, you're going to walk down the street. Someone's going to know you're going to walk into rooms, and a large number of people are going to either know you or have an impression of you based on the fact of how other people react. And there's so much anonymity to a place like Paris, where I'm a part of a very small bubble. I'm not as confident in the main language spoken as I am in English. And so I think that's really good. I think I came in with a big ego. I think it was a good time to come in. If you have that foundation of sense of self, openness to experience, and you can kind of, you can rely on your resilience to sort of get hit in the mouth a little bit and come out better for it. But that's very different, right? If I was a stage of my life where I was having, deep mental health troubles, my relationship to loneliness was different than it is. And I think there's something that I think about a lot of this. There's sort of an axis between how much you want comfort and safety versus new experience. And I value new experience really highly. That just comes at the expense of a certain amount of people building you up, right? You're on your own a lot. People don't know how, you're not going to get the same kinds of supports until you crack in, until you build that space. And I crave that. And so I've enjoyed that. I think to trace it back, the work I do here is work I enjoy. I like the downsides. I like the twos of this place, which is I think a reference to some other things that I can jump into in a second.
But Dexter, let's be honest. If we think about your situation, right? Like it's true that you have to throw yourself in these new situations, and I'm really happy to hear how humbling it is. But you're also very privileged in the case that you have a cushy government job, right? Like you didn't have to go through all the same paperwork that the rest of us do when we move to a different country, and it was a little bit more of an easier process, no? Or am I wrong in saying that?
Oh, no, that's absolutely true. Like occasionally I get a little bit of like, oh, my bank is being, whatever. But like, on the whole, the systems are totally built for people. And there's a certain amount of like, I think it's a standard to expect of this is what it could work like, should work like on all this. I didn't move to a developing country. I moved to a very developed, vibrant place with enough expats going on.
What do you mean by the systems are built for people like you?
Well, I have a European passport, also helps with that. But this systems are designed to have weird people move around, right? We want to have, it's valuable for governments and organizations around the world and global business or whatnot to have people who get educated and contribute fun ideas or whatever, move around places. And so they make it really easy to do that, right? It's the advent, all the countries are competing to steal away those kinds of people and make it a hassle for everybody else, right? And there's so I'm.
Well, what are some of maybe both of your guys' ideas? I'm interested by what you said, how the system's kind of built for weird people being able to move around. And that's something I wrote about as well, and something I want to kind of achieve with this project by people sharing their stories of immigration, is to kind of change the system where weird people, the Western people, are able to move around easily, and then people who actually need to move around have to go through all this bureaucratic shit. And you work in bureaucracy, Dexter, and I think you're living proof that not all bureaucrats are demons. Some bureaucrats are wonderful people.
But so what are
some of your ideas on how to change this?
Well, I think part of it is having people who have some of that experience involved in the design of the processes. And I'll say this one. One of the things that was a wee bit of a hassle is I had to get into sort of healthcare systems here. I had to get a original copy of my birth certificate sent from sort of Vancouver City Hall or whatever, translated into French, and then notarized to the Canadian Embassy. That's a hassle for me.
Yeah, that's normal.
And I had to pay $50, but like all fine. And a huge amount of like that's totally unnecessary. But if I came from a country that couldn't easily translate documents into French because they had the official language, or somewhere where I couldn't just send it, have my dad or me, or because he was closer to, go and pick up the documents from City Hall because we have a fine relationship to a stable government. That's a system that's designed to be institutionally racist. Now, Canada will have similar equivalents of that. I'll never run into that in the Canadian system. I'm never going to confront that. Mm-hmm. And so it is a problem when you design bureaucracies to deal with immigration and nobody has any idea what it's like or what it would be required to go through those things. So there's a fair amount of user-centric design is some of the buzzwords they use in government now, but thinking about what it would be like to use the system, building bureaucracies and teaching bureaucrats, empowering bureaucrats to genuinely be empathetic. And that's part of the problem, right? These things are hassles because they're faceless, and then all of a sudden, anybody who doesn't fit a fairly narrow box of who we expect to be moving around the world is going to fall through cracks. And I've gotten to see little bits of that in fairly tolerable ways by virtue of moving between countries and things like that. But by and large, that's light years apart from what is designed to keep people out. And then there's a matter of interpretation. Is this the system deliberately designing itself this way to keep people of color, people from poor countries out? Or is it a matter of these things were just designed with ignorance because somebody didn't have awareness of those experiences? And I think that you could go a long way to fixing these things by having people who had some lived experience of these difficulties articulate what kinds of supports and help they need. And I think especially as technology starts to advance, the ability of government to automate a whole lot of the back-end bureaucratic processes and things like that is fine, and you need to invest more in some of that face-to-face help you through the system kind of thing. Because I mean, Nolan, you'll know this through your experience of trying to move into Spain. Like, the reality is, if somebody's wealthy enough to afford like a lawyer to take them through the process, it gets a lot easier, right? And through all of these kinds of things. And that's it. So if you have an institution who thinks you're valuable, that, you know, processes tons of people moving countries, they'll pay for the support staff to, you know,
Definitely.
And so that's really where this has got to come through. Is
let's dive into that a bit further. So, Dexter, the last thing you mentioned that the way that the bureaucratic system is set up, especially when you want to immigrate to a new country, it's much easier for Westerners. And you also mentioned that it's harder for countries where people come from and they're people of color, right? But I think it's not only people of color that are put at a disadvantage in the cases of, well, Ukraine. I mean, my partner, she's Ukrainian, and she has gone through the same struggle as many people of color from a third world country have to go through when immigrating to a new country, right? So I think it's important that when we're trying to fix this issue, that we don't only look at visual minorities or like people that, people of color in this situation, right? We have to look at the country that they're from, the socio-economic background that they're from. Otherwise, you might end up in a situation where people who don't seem like they're visually at a disadvantage and still are at a disadvantage don't get the benefits of certain affirmative action type things or policies that might come into place. What do you guys think about this?
I wouldn't fight that. I think the case I was trying to make before was not that we should create smaller buckets on these kinds of things, or use big proxies like that. I think you should be designing systems that can be responsive to who people are on an individual basis, and give every person the capacity and the ability, like, to give their best shot to say, hey, how can we help you the most of this? Everybody wins when you make this process as seamless as possible. The reality is we only make it seamless for a very small number of people, and it tends to be wealthy and educated. And I think those, and then beyond that, then there's a ton of passport privilege that comes on top of that.
And for sure, like, and just to add into that, like, the immigration process should not be determined by what passport or what color your passport is, or what the name on the front of your passport is, right? Like, every single person, as you just said, Dexter, immigration should be looked at honestly as on an individual basis, case by case. In reality, it shouldn't just be generalized. I come from Canada, so I have access to essentially almost any country I would like to go to. Like, it's super simplistic. The system is designed so we have to go through very minimal paperwork. Whereas, like, your partner, Nolan, I don't know if you've mentioned in previous podcasts, but just to come visit us in Canada, it was rejection letter, and it took a freaking war in Ukraine for her to get a visa under a refugee status to come visit. Like, that's just ridiculous, just because she comes from Ukraine.
I know, and we're talking about a person that speaks several languages, is well educated, never committed a crime, and for her to be treated like we do, like a human, a war had to break out in her country, which is just sickening about our system, and it's obviously so flawed, and we need to figure out ways to fix this. Now, one person or one organization that I know that's trying to create an online country is Plumia, and Plumia is a project that, and their parent company is Safety Wing. Are you guys familiar with Safety Wing?
I'm not.
So Safety Wing's an insurance for nomads. And I've read about Plumia. I wrote an article about it as well. It's a country funded by an insurance company. And I think a lot of their goals, like if you look at their mission statements, they look great, right? Like the idea is to give people who have these passports that are at a disadvantage the ability to be able to get this passport from an online country. right? And then from there it would be much easier to travel. But the thing is, they're just developing this right now. And the only thing they can think of is that to get this passport, you would need to have a certain amount of money or a certain income, which again is systemically flawed. So how could we fix that?
How are you asking how we can fix?
Yeah, like how could we create either an online country with a different passport, or maybe we just have to stay away from that. Maybe that doesn't make any sense, right, Dexter? I see you kind of like frowning here. Do you think an online country and like having this passport that is apart from physical countries is a bad idea?
Well, sorry, just to say one thing is the problem what like should we be trying to create a means of travel so everyone is able to travel freely, or should it actually be the responsibility of governments, for example, Canada, to just why do we even have these restrictions in the first place? Like, why does freedom of movement not exist on a greater scale than just in Europe? Like, what? And I don't actually know, but what are the pros and the cons of just opening up the borders per se and just letting people move as they wish? Would that have negative impacts on the economy? Would it? I'm not sure, but I think those are more the questions we have to ask instead of trying just to create a workaround, a new fake passport or whatever. It could just be much more straightforward, and you could have freedom of movement in more countries available, I think.
Definitely. And that's what a lot of people have responded to me as well when I bring up this plumia idea of an online country. They're like, why don't we just expand the way that Europe does it? Right?
Like, there has been talks that I think it was Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and England were going to kind of start their own group of country, whatever you want to call it. I guess those are Commonwealth countries currently, but they were going to, I think there's the idea floating around that they wanted to open their borders and have a freedom of movement agreement between them, which I think would be a really great idea, but I don't know if that will actually come to fruition or not.
Yeah, I tend to agree by and large with Keaton's approach on this. I think you can try to find your hack workarounds to an existing system, but the reality is we should be like the current system should be expanded. How significantly is a matter of experts to figure out on those kinds of things. I think there's far too great a risk aversion that currently exists in these systems, and I think we can push it a little bit more. You are, and almost inevitably, the more you expand, you'll have a few more people hacking that system. But I think the net benefits are there, and so how. I'll leave that to experts to figure out exactly how, but I think this is the kind of thing where people like us should apply the right kinds of pressure to see those systems expanded to allow more people to get these things, right? Europe's Erasmus system has been phenomenal for building great cultural ties between people getting to go travel and see things and all that. That's something that's a privilege afforded to reasonably Europeans getting a post-secondary education. Right?
And Dexter, what are some kind of ways that we could apply pressure?
Joining organizations, signing petitions. I think there's a certain amount of finding how to advocate for these kinds of things. I also think there's a certain amount of building important ties between countries, right? If you're a member of a political party, and you can build stronger ties between that and an equivalent political party in a different country, you can start to push for those things, right? If you're in journalism, I mean, you're doing an interesting example of this here, right? Where you're able to build a conversation that goes beyond the country context. And I think that starts to build an awareness of the degree of similarity. And that returns to a point I made at the very beginning of the first podcast. Most of this is similarity. Most of what I see in these situations is similarities between people. So the fewer barriers you can put up between people, like being able to hang out with each other, being able to integrate, being able to fall in love with each other, being able to be friends and all that, the better. And you should have to have a far better justification of each step in order to put up barriers. I think that's the issue that we've run into here, is that in most cases, you have to prove why you should remove a restriction as opposed to justifying why a restriction should exist on freedom. Those kinds of things. And so I'd just like to flip that conversation a little bit. I think that happens as people start to push harder and harder to say, we want greater degrees of integration. We want that. And I think there has been a failure of progressive moves to be as loud on these kinds of issues of we are similar. We want to be integrated with other cultures and populations. We want to be friends with these people. We want a degree to we want to be able to go to the same schools and things like that. And I think there's been a loss in, that the other side has been louder on this. I think it's the job of people to come in and say, no, we like this. And I think that would show itself in the degree to which younger populations, by and large, do like getting to know people from different backgrounds and are open to different people, different experiences, diversity, and inclusion.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Dexter, thanks for bringing that up. I think that's a lot to think about. Also, anyone listening right now, if you have any ideas, remember, join the community at at withoutborders.fyi so we can discuss this further. I'm by no means an expert on this, but as Dexter said, we have to raise our voices when it comes to this. We have to put pressure on the government bodies. Now, Dexter himself, he works in strategic foresight and social policy, right? So, Dexter, just to expand on that a bit further, do you think protests are a good way to go for this? Or do you think it's better to do this more with petitions and things like that?
Both and, but by and large, protest is a fairly effective means of getting done what you want to get done, right? If you look at why Quebec has cheaper education, they've been willing to fight for it. I think all of us grew up through an era of teacher strikes and lockouts in BC, but British Columbia has one of the highest performing education systems in the world because, by and large, people are willing to fight for it. You get what you organize for. And I think, by and large, if you're willing to push and fight for things, that happens. And this is never a question of which specific tactic works. I think it's more a matter of building the ecosystem where there's enough people fighting for a cause through different tools and methods that those things come through. There's that Martin Luther King quote about how riots are the language of the silence to the unheard. I'm not excited, butchering it a little bit, but by and large, if the only means available to you is to protest and break stuff, then that's the only means available to you. But I'm not going to condemn, for the most part, most means of this kind of advocacy and protest. I think people should be given the opportunity to push. And if that's coming out, then the state has failed to provide those people with the ability to advocate for their ideas in a reasonable form. And I'm a firm believer that the state has a responsibility to provide the kinds of forums for discussion of ideas that should lead to those kinds of positive and progressive changes.
Yeah, I agree. Keaton, anything you want to add on my end? This is about all I can unpack here. Is there anything else you want to add, Keaton?
No, I think I totally agree with what Dexter said. And I think protesting is definitely, I don't think here in Canada we do enough of it, especially when you see in France, certainly in France, they protest for anything. And I think that's actually good. And I think, if we want real change, we have to be willing to fight for it. All we can do is we can continue raising awareness by doing our podcasts and you by writing your articles, but by actually demonstrating and showing that we're willing to fight for it. That's how we're going to get change.
Yeah. All right, let's bring this a little bit in a different direction because
there have not been enough jokes. That's what you're saying. It's a little too heavy, bro.
This episode's way heavier than the last one. By the way, if you tuned into this episode and you need something a little bit lighter, tune into the first one. We were shooting the shit a little bit more. This got a bit heavy, but no, good. But it's interesting because Keaton just differentiated between the protest culture in France and Canada. And then Dexter also differentiated between the different protest cultures within Canada, right? When we compare Quebec to British Columbia.
That's France, man. They consider themselves French, even if they don't have a French passport. So,
well, that was going to be kind of my follow-up question is from your guys' experience, because you guys know way more about this than I do. What's the difference or what are some cultural differences, similarities that you've noticed between France and Quebec? I was about to say Quebec in the real French, but I thought better of it.
Well, you just said it, so
Well, I had to get some jokes in there, right?
yeah. I mean, Dexter, you live there, so you should probably go first. Like, I do have family there. I've visited several times. I love it. It definitely does feel like a European corner of Canada. But that's about as far as I know about it. Dexter,
The Europeans would feel that it's far more North American than European place. I think it's a nice place in between.
for sure.
It's hard to get decent poutine in France. I think that's disappointing. That's a real loss. Actually, this gets one important thing. I do have a belief that Paris is the best like upper middle class food city. It's phenomenal. You know, maybe but it's hard to get like cheap food. Whereas Vancouver and Montreal can do some very good like cheap drunk food, and so you know you pick out some of those things. And that's where poutine comes in. I think that's one of the bigger differences.
If you want to actually talk about food for a quick second, Paris has an amazing, it's widely regarded as the best food city in the world. But I actually think that's overrated.
I disagree completely.
What?
As in, how?
That's the best food city in the world?
Wait, sorry. What part do you? Yeah, I think it's overrated.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Okay.
But of course, that's so subjective, right? Like, you and I are both people that love a really eclectic mix of food, right? We love a lot of different Asian types of food as well. And then, as Dexter mentioned, like especially in Paris, it's
hard to get cheap eat.
Yeah,
but it does have good food, but not. I would say it doesn't have a very diverse, like, of course you can get any style of food, but I would argue that Vancouver has a more diverse food scene than Paris.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look, I think that the advantage in anywhere, like, why London's got a great food scene. It's because English food's so,
oh yeah.
Right? And so the reality is we're more open to other people coming in and telling you how to do this. Because if you're
That's
English,
a good way of putting it.
We know how to make food. Everyone's like, no, you're a fucking clown. You don't know how to make food at all. So and they were recently opened. I mean, giant colonial empire. But a bunch of people came in who knew how to make food and made food there and did it really well. It's like the national dish of English, probably Indian food, right? Like there's a whole bunch of variety there. And I think there's a certain amount of France is very good at a pretty wide range of food. It's not great vegetarian food, but it tends to be fairly expensive. But there is a very high quality haute cuisine here. And that's why so many of our food words are French. Like they do come to play on them. That's undeniable. But
I do find outside of Paris, the food is affordable. If you go to the smaller towns and I don't know what they're called, but you get like the menu, right? And then that's usually affordable. You can get like for 18 euros, kind of like a 3-course meal and a glass of wine. But I am also talking about 8 years ago. So
18 euros with the inflation these days, probably 30 euros these days, man.
Oh no.
I mean, look, I think there's a difference there. It's a 3-course meal. Like, there's an appreciation and a willingness to spend on cuisine. You know, you're going to sit down for 2 hours. You're going to have a conversation. There's a good, nice bottle of wine that comes along with it. That bottle of wine's going to be far cheaper than in Canada. But there's a certain amount of, there was an established food tradition and that it didn't exist, right? Or didn't exist to the same extent, right? And so you're just not displacing it.
Nolan, was it? It was you. It was your Errores de Guiri. I can't speak Spanish.
Errores de Guiri.
You did
mistakes of Guiri.
One of your little sketches was kind of playing on when the Europeans come to North America, they get kicked out of the restaurant because they haven't ordered yet, or they stopped ordering. And then one thing about North America is as soon as you stop eating or ordering food, your bill's on the table and the machine is in hand. They don't let you there's no table culture. Like, it's just you go to the restaurant to eat and then you leave. Which is so nice about France or Europe, actually.
Is there a word for that in French? Because in Spanish we call it sobremesa. Like, on top of the table, right? So after you eat, you in Spain, you still sit at the table for another 4 hours, sometimes just talking with one beer.
Yeah.
Right? Is there a word for that in French?
I would have to ask Marie.
Okay.
But yeah, like one time we have a family dinner, and family dinner would start at 7 o'clock or whatever, and you wouldn't leave the table. We didn't leave the table till midnight. Like,
Yeah.
it's so nice.
Yeah.
And does that exist in Quebec?
I mean, it depends, right? Like I integrated in the sense similar to what I did here, right? With a pretty international bubble of young people and things like that. It's not a representative sample of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
You know, a little bit there. I think Montreal has. I mean, I've worked as like a dishwasher a few times in some nice restaurants in Montreal. It's got a really great ability to have very interesting chefs come in and open some cool restaurants and do some really cool work. Because the real estate's affordable. And there is a commitment to innovative cuisine and things like that.
Dexter, I think you had mentioned, and I'm going back a couple years now, but I think one time you had mentioned that Montreal, in your opinion, wasn't a city that people stayed in. I think you had said it's like a city where people go, but they don't, and they start the careers, but they don't end up finishing their careers there. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember that. I probably water down a little bit for the sake of not getting myself killed and if this went too public. But yeah, by and large, I think the city of Montreal has 300,000 college and university students, and so that means a huge portion of the population. You know, it gets regularly voted one of, if not the best student cities in the world. But those people don't all stay. If you're Quebecois but you're highly ambitious, there's more money to be made outside of Quebec. If you're an Anglophone and you don't speak great French, there's a ceiling on your opportunities within Quebec. So there's a certain amount of people who just flow out. I mean, Toronto is a massive beneficiary of Quebec brain drain, right? People go get educated in Montreal. Eventually, they've been there for 5 or 6 years or 4 years or whatever, and they go back and the jobs are available in Toronto. One of the reasons that Canada should believe in transfer systems between provinces is Quebec has been subsidizing the ability of everybody to go get a really useful, cultural, interesting experience, bring back those experiences to other cities in Canada. And I think Montreal has been a massive beneficiary to the rest of the country because you get people who went and lived interesting parts of their lives and take those experiences back and commit to making the communities even better. Yeah. I think by and large, there's a lot of transient young person population to Montreal. And that has its pros and cons. But it's a hard place to stay if you have certain kinds of ambitions or linguistic abilities, lack of linguistic abilities.
What kind of ambitions are difficult to achieve in Montreal?
Let's anecdotally, let's talk about doctors. To be able to function as a doctor in Quebec, you probably want to be able to serve clients in French, which limits the pool of people that can work with that. But given things like
language-wise, it's difficult to achieve certain things.
Well, no, there's another tee off to this though. If you're really good in French and in English, you could work there. But if Alberta's like, we're going to pay you twice as much, and we're not going to tax you, then you transfer back on those things, and that's very rarely included in the Canadian conversation about transfers between provinces and things like that, because economically there are big transfers between provinces. Ontario is probably the biggest beneficiary of that sort of cultural brain drain out of that. The Americans are as well. And so there's a flow between the country that I think is important. But yeah, a lot of your Montreal population is there for a little bit. It's a city designed around people being young and finding themselves. There are lots of people who do stay successfully, but not a lot. But a lot do leave.
Also, just why this is so fascinating as well for the listeners that aren't familiar with Canada. Montreal's the second largest city in Canada, and by like quite a wide margin over Vancouver, which is the third largest city. So it's just fascinating that you wouldn't necessarily be able to, I guess. Well, I mean, of course, sorry, I shouldn't say wouldn't be able to, but you can if you want. But it's interesting that there's a kind of a cap on how high you could rise potentially, or what your career opportunities would be when we're talking about a very, very large city, second largest in Canada. So that's kind of just wanted to add that for the listeners. But yeah.
Perfect. Well, guys, thanks for sharing all of that. Is there anything else you want to add about Montreal or about some of the cultural experiences that you've had in Montreal versus in France? Because we're just coming up on the half-hour mark here. So
I want to inject a few more dumb hot takes because we've been lacking in that. We got to up the supply of dumb hot takes.
all right, let's hear it.
On my firm belief that cultural differences are exaggerated, I have a firm belief that all great cities smell like pee. This is important. This is an important fact that you can probably track out. I don't think anybody's done empirical studies. When I think of really great global cities, all of them had, there's enough fun stuff going on that, people were moving between fun places, or, they had a few too many drinks or whatever, and they peed on some stuff. And so you've got to deal with that. And I made some points in the first podcast on the book, what the work is entailed of living in a high energy, intense place. I have a limited definition of what greatness is, but, high energy culture setting places where people are pushing the envelope, probably going to smell like pee. We'll probably have some rats too, but definitely when I think of great city, Montreal smelled like pee, Berlin smells like pee, Paris smells like pee, New York smells like pee everywhere. And that's part of the vibe. That's the trade-off you got to have with these things.
Dexter just steps off the plane. Oh yeah, this is going to be an interesting city. Keaton, what about you? Anything to add?
No, I think we touched on the Montreal thing. I don't have anything more to add. No.
Let's just finish off with one more because, Dexter, you told me something that I found interesting and you just didn't expand on it, but you mentioned how Pierre Elliott Trudeau said the best thing to do in Ottawa is to take the 5 o'clock Friday bus to Montreal. What does this mean?
Well, I've lived in Ottawa as well as one of the more dull places I live, but I think it's
But more
not
dull places or adult places?
both. So I think I'm going to be charitable on it, but I think that quote is bang on. And Pierre Elliott Trudeau knew how to drop a joke. Some of his politics I agree with, some of it I think he could have done a little bit better, but man of his era, whatever, was hilarious sometimes. And so that line about the best thing in Ottawa is the 5 o'clock Friday bus to Montreal was that if you want to have a fun time, it's not the right place. And so my understanding of is that,
okay.
but at a certain point, right? If you're married, you have kids, you have a dog, you might have your cottage out in the countryside, as Ontario, what middle class Ontario people do or whatever. Ottawa's not you're living the kind of life where you can't get bored of the 5 restaurants and the 8 friends that you have, right? Whereas you're a single person living around. Like I would get bored of the 8 friends that I have in Ottawa and the 5 restaurants. And so when you're ready to make that settle
again,
down,
Dexter does not generalize, right?
No, seriously, you could look this up. There are not more than 8 restaurants in Ottawa. There's a bunch of Subways, McDonald's, and whatever that coffee shop is that they have there that isn't on top of the Tim Hortons. But then other than that, there's access to nature. It's a place you can afford to live.
Starbucks.
There's really interesting work. No, it's called Bridgehead. They have a bridge. I don't think it made it outside Ottawa. They do have a couple unique things there. And by and large, there's enough. If you've got an interesting work and a good family structure, you can make enough work there, and you can build. And you can leave the city and make all of those kinds of things work. But why do I personally want to do the work of living somewhere that smells like pee? Like Ottawa doesn't smell like pee. So it's a fine place, and if you don't like the smell of pee, that's the place for you, man. But if you want more than 8 bars and 5 friends, or 5 friends and 8 bars, I'm not really sure at this point. The numbers don't matter. If you want to be able to do that, and you're going to have to put up with the smell of pee. You're going to have to put up with the waiters being a dick, and you find the trade-off that works for you. And if Ottawa's not the thing, maybe it's the boathouse thing, or living in the rural countryside kind of thing, where you will have to do a lot more manual labor on your house to make your living work. You just gotta pick the work that works for you.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, let's end that there. Just on the note that if you want to go to a great city, it's got to smell like pee. And Dexter's an Oxford graduate, so obviously he knows what he's talking about, right?
Pissed all over that place.
Pissed all over that place. Okay. All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And all the listeners right now, I hope you tune in next time. Remember, this was Without Borders, and please subscribe to withoutborders.fyi. Tune in next time.
Thanks so much, Nolan.